Okay, so we are at episode 52 of Get Jashed, and we have a special return guest. So Luke Sparrow is an embodiment coach, among many other things, but you may remember him from episode 21, where we spoke about the language of chronic pain and a lot about embodiment and the steps of coming to understand what is going on for your body, whether it is a pain or whether it is something else. So partly by demand, partly because I feel like I'm not done with this conversation yet either. I am
Yeah,
super happy to have Luke back. So thanks for joining.
I don't think we'll ever be done.
No,
We can keep going.
pretty much. And it's hard because there's such a time limit to these episodes, but really it's one of those things that you could talk about for hours and just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So like with that having been said, in that first episode in the language of chronic pain, we spoke a lot about self-awareness being a really key tool in how you become aware of your body, especially like with chronic pain is a thing that's happening between your brain system and your body. And self-awareness is such a convoluted beast.
Yeah.
As such. So we wanted to expand on that, but we also referred to that as step one. But there's more. Like it's to what next, and then what does that even mean? So I guess in the context of yes, chronic pain, but also how it plays a role in. It's probably going to be a loaded question that you're going to get, but how it plays a role in our patterns and our behaviors and um there's something that you mentioned in that episode also of like when it is unconscious, when it remains unconscious, we can't actually then enact any change. We can't actually shift our state because it's not been brought into the light. So
Yeah, and I mean, you spoke to that commonly known like stages of awareness where you start with that unconscious incompetence where
mm,
you don't even know that you don't know. And
yeah,
so
you're just like, oh, I'm good, everything's fine, I have no idea.
and so that's a potentially dangerous place to be in, particularly if that thing that you don't know is a big part of what's causing an enormous amount of stress on your system.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of what we were getting at with from the pain side of things was with chronic pain, we know for sure that a large part of how we treat that now is about looking at the brain, because it's the brain that decides whether you experience the sensation of pain. And so, with the research that's been done, I just love that we, with our own investigation through the sciences and everything else, that we've arrived at the same conclusion that various spiritual teachings over thousands of years have been saying for a long time,
Mm.
which is this self-inquiry, right? Um, so I just love that that's where we're arriving. Um,
Yeah, oh my
it's,
god, yeah.
it's fantastic. Um, but yeah,
It's big, right? Like it's you could go like, yeah, self-inquiry, self-awareness, and then you're like, holy shit, where to from here almost,
yeah,
because I think it shows up in a lot of ways with pain, but also beyond pain. Um, the last episode that was released was about how trauma informs like a lot of um our behaviors and our reactions and everything like that as adults. But so I feel like it's related to that in that way as well. But how do you bring that self-awareness? How do you even decide or
yeah,
realize that there is something to become aware about, because you're kind
yeah,
of still in that unconscious incompetence stage where you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know that there's something to bring your awareness to then look at and then to like process in some way, how do you do it?
absolutely, yeah. And I guess we have to really kind of regress this right back. And even so, us having this conversation about self awareness tips us into that conscious incompetence. So, if I've never heard the word self-awareness or anything around that same idea, then I'm sitting in that unconscious incompetence. I literally don't know that I don't know that.
Yeah.
But now with beautiful podcasts like yourself, we've got this conversation now where we're being presented with these ideas. So now I'm aware, I'm conscious that I'm incompetent in something. I don't know that I know that I don't know something. And that's a great big leap. And I think it's worth being joyful about, oh, sweet, there's this thing I don't know that I didn't know before. And I'm going to be absolutely ignorant about it at the moment, but that's how everything starts, right? I'm always going to start there. It has to start there. And so I'm at the beginning of something, as opposed to, oh, fuck, there's this thing that I don't know anything about, and that's going to now cause me an enormous amount of stress. And we don't have to go down that way. We can just sort of go, sweet, all right. I might not even touch that yet. I might not be ready to go there yet, but at least it's now there.
I liken it to like that monster in the dark. Like if you know that there's something there, but you don't really know, by at least acknowledging what it is, it no longer seems as scary because you can kind of see it for what it is rather than what your imagination is creating it to be. But at the same time, coming to that state of conscious incompetence of going, well, there's so much that I don't know, can also be like a punch in the gut or a slap in the face or like this holy fucking shit. What do that's a lot. And now I have to change everything, like it could easily go that way as well, right?
And look, and this is where a lot of chronic pain, specifically for those people who experience that, who then go to every specialist they can think of, and they try everything, and no one, these authorities in the figure of who are supposed to be specialists in these things, are giving people answers like, look, we just don't know. And so now I've got this problem, and I don't know. I've got no answers for it. So I'm in this unknown territory, and that exacerbates to a sometimes extreme degree the actual issue that they're having in the first place. And so it becomes this feedback loop, and it exacerbates that whole pain situation. So I think this is where the first step of self-awareness is now becoming, we're really trying to see that be introduced into our approach with these things, because what we find is that simply a little bit of education about this, a little bit of understanding of how pain works, and a little bit of understanding about the brain's role in that, without any semantics, just straight up like this is how it works, that is a major first step to people getting some relief. And we literally see people reducing their pain by just education alone. There was a doctor way back who used to deal with back pain, Dr. John Sarno, and that was almost his entire approach. Was he would deliver lectures. He'd literally do like a 2-hour lecture on pain and how it works and the mind's way it is, and how what emotions had to do with it. And he would deliver this to people. He screened these people beforehand, but to make sure they were like at least open to the idea, right?
I was gonna say, because like I was just like, to play devil's advocate, it was gonna be like, well, what about the people who are just in the space of, I just need this pain fixed, what can you do, and don't want to hear it.
So he would make sure people were going from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, to see that are you okay with the idea that there's something you might not understand that may be playing a part in your pain. Are you open to that idea, even if it's like quite unusual to you and a little bit like something you've never heard before? Are you open to hearing about that? And that was his screening process. A little bit more complicated than that, but essentially that's what it was.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, but this guy had a 90-something% success rate,
which is huge in any pain
massive
sphere, right?
Like, massive. And So people who've been experiencing back pain for like, sometimes decades, having, complete remissions of that, simply because they've eliminated that negative feedback loop from education. So, yeah, so what basically that and many other bits of evidence are really strongly suggesting that, hey, look, we've got to learn about this self-awareness. If I'm going to go on a journey to start to look at myself and how myself is responding to the sensations coming from my body, I have to figure out, how do I approach that? And I think the big thing is to firstly just look at the words, right? So we've got awareness of self. So the first burning question, at least was for me, was, okay, well, what's the self? What is that? If I'm going to be aware of this thing, what is
like,
the
what do you
self?
mean? Yeah.
Someone define that for me, right? So when you say to somebody, okay, well, so when you say myself, what are you talking about? Right? What is that you're talking about? And when I ask this question, most of the time we sort of draw an initial blank, or there's a very quick response of, well, I mean, it's a confusing thing. It's like it's almost like it's not even a question. It's like, well,
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
like, it's, what do you mean? It's me. It's
I'm
this.
yeah, and
all of
there's
this.
words, but you can see the visceral like confusion of that question. And so the next question that's quite interesting is then to go, well, when did your self start? When did you start? Right? And that's another mind boggler, because it's
that's an existential question also. Like,
huge,
that's
right?
how do we cannot really fully conclusively answer that question ever. Like,
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay.
So
Luke Sparrow,
we're now,
everyone, making our
yeah,
minds melt.
we're now going into a space that you probably never really have thought about entering before, right? And it can be a little bit confronting at first. And look, these questions are not new. This is the sort of things that you'd sit in a ashram and be questioned by your guru to bring you into like a state of nothingness. But there is some pragmatism behind these questions, and it's not all just semantics. So the self is actually a very human thing. It's a tool, really, because the thing that human beings do better than any animal that we understand is that we're able to go, okay, there's a problem here, and I'm going to think up a solution to that problem. I'm going to imagine how that solution may feel. I'm going to imagine what the result may be. I'm going to reflect on potential experiences that are similar in the past. And all of this is happening in your mind to come up with the best solution to a problem, right? And not
It's
just
proof
problem.
of, have we done this before? Have we met this before? And how did we overcome it? Yeah.
The human mind is amazing like that. Now, that's nothing new. A lot of animals have sensations. But the difference between us and animals, at least one of them, is that we have this reference point, this imaginary reference point to look at. That we look at what happened to this reference point. I'm going to call it an avatar, right? It's like a character. What happened to this character in the past? What would this character feel like? What would be the result if we did A, B, and C? And we can reflect on all of that, and then from all of that computing, we can make a decision. Now, none of that would be possible if we didn't first have this thing that we call the self, right? It's a very, very advanced tool that human beings do, and that we developed as a way of adapting and surviving to an ever-changing world. And it's why human beings are the most dominant creature on the earth, because it's an enormously useful evolutionary skill that we developed. So when we say the self, what we're talking about is this amazing tool that we have. It's an incredibly amazing tool, and it's what allows us to learn so quickly and progress and grow. And in a generation, in a lifetime, we can make enormous change even on a genetic level that we then hopefully advances our genetics, that we pass on to the next generation, and so on and so forth. And this has always been the goal of genes, is to become immortal, essentially. Just want to, the impulse of genetics is just to continue that genetic line and employ whatever the best tools possible that we can get access to make sure that we continue that genetic line. And for human beings, we created the self. It was a very useful tool. So that, for me, that's the route, like the more pragmatic way to look at what I'm saying when I say the self. It's a tool that I have that makes me very good at learning.
That's a great way to put it. Like, it's a tool that I have, that is mine, that is me, but it's a tool.
Now, all right. So,
oh no, there's more coming. Go.
So it's a useful tool. It's useful if I don't believe that I am it. This is the next mental gymnastics.
Yes.
Right.
Say more.
Yeah. So if we're gonna have this self that I can watch and things are happening to it, and from that reflection, I can make decisions and whatnot. What I am also saying there is that there is some element of me that is the watcher of that.
Yes.
Right?
This is exactly what I teach my army guys. Yes. It's you are witnessing awareness. You are awareness witnessing your awareness. Yeah.
So this is when we're talking about a practice, when we're talking about practicing self-awareness, what we're practicing is, firstly, can I get a sense that I'm not that character. I'm not that character that all the things are happening to. That is a generated thing that I have made as a useful tool for me to then navigate the world. And can I get a sense that there's the self, and then there's this element of me that is the watcher of that? And can I first, like, at least on a cognitive level, go, yeah, all right, I can kind of see how that works, and get some sort of level of understanding of that. And that's kind of like the first step to practicing this thing called self-awareness, right? So we're learning to be able to go back a little bit and go, here's this thing called the self, and I'm watching it. I'm learning to watch it.
I'm observing it like a movie screen, like it's just what's playing out. Yeah.
Now, the way I've put that forward may resonate for some people. It may not. It doesn't really matter. There's many ways we could analogistically sort of figure that out. But what I suggest to people is to keep at that investigation and try and find your way to where that lands for you, and you get a sense of an experience where, and it can be quite a profound experience to go, holy shit, this thing that I've always called me is not entirely me, and there's actually a deeper element to myself. Because if I can get that, what I'm really saying is there's a deeper part of myself that is able to watch that thing that I call me. And that's quite a new thing for a lot of people. That's heavy.
It feels heavy because you can't grasp it, right? Like, you can't physically actually grab a hold of it and say, well, this is what it is. It's just it just is.
So for me, that becomes a really useful tool for so many things, because as I've practiced that, and other people I know who also practice this, it gives you quite a superpower, because you can then basically, any sensations that you're feeling, emotions that you're feeling, thoughts that you're having, what that then gets filtered through is also this understanding that that's my body doing its job. It's taking what I see in the world through all my senses, all my sensory organs are taking in that information. It's getting filtered through my brain, and it's getting filtered through this character that I call myself. And after all that filtration happens, we end up with a result. And that result is normally an action, or an impulse, or something that we want to do in response to that.
Yeah.
And if
From your
yeah,
sorry, keep going.
you're right.
From your, especially particularly from a counseling perspective, can you explain the difference between that and dissociation? Because I just really feel like it needs to be like
Yeah, sure.
clarified.
Yeah.
'Cause
So, yeah, it's a good question.
yeah.
um,
Because otherwise people
yeah,
might like run away and be like, cool, I'm not the experience. It's like, well, this is the embodiment part. You are you are experiencing it, but
yes.
yeah.
So, and it's a good progression, because what can happen, and this is what happens in trauma, and especially when in younger life.
Hmm.
Okay, it's probably best to frame one thing. So, the first thing that you do. So Jess is born into the world. She's a
Hooray.
crying, young, beautiful little baby, and
Yeah.
over that first 7 years of her life, her only imperative is to attach to some kind of carer who's going to pretty much do everything for her. Because for the first 7 years of your life, you're useless,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
are the most useless animal on this planet.
Well, I mean,
For
we
that
bring
first,
joy, but there's
yeah.
a
So
yeah.
we can't do much for ourselves in those first years. We need an enormous amount of care.
Yeah.
And so it kind of makes sense that the most impulsive action that's happening innately in you when you're that young little child is to connect to some sort of carer, no matter what. That's your survival. That is like life or death. If you don't get connected to someone who's going to care for you, you're done, right? And just feel the weight of that, because that's what we're really talking about here. And so to do that, sometimes we do very maladaptive things.
Mm.
We may have a parental figure that really doesn't deal with conflict very well. You may have another parental figure that can't deal with extreme amounts of emotion happening, and here you have this crying baby, and the parents just
It's having all the feels.
yeah, and these parents are just overwhelmed by this, for their own reasons, and that baby doesn't get the care that it needs, right? So that's a pretty severe situation, and that basically leaves the child with this situation where it can't leave, and it can't assert itself because it's 2 years old. All it knows how to do is just scream and cry, and do its best to get that care that it needs. But the next best thing that it can do in order not to threaten that attachment is to just detach from yourself.
Mm.
So what that means is to detach from those emotions and just not let them happen, because at the moment they are causing a threat to your survival. They're causing a threat to the people that are in charge of making sure you survive. So it makes perfect sense that we would, at a young age, develop a nervous system that would just would basically say, these emotions are not okay. These emotions are not safe, and if you continue to do them, we're threatening our survival. And
Yeah.
that becomes your first foundation of truth. So that then carries on into our adulthood, and we learn that it's easier and safer to just detach from the self, right? The self, again, being that version, made up of your sensations and the things that are happening in your body, the way the world is filtered through your mind and this idea of who you are. And if those things are getting perceived as dangerous, I'm just gonna detach from that. I'm gonna use the amazing parts of my brain that can just inhibit all of that, and I don't have to feel it anymore.
Which
And
then
so,
shows up as an adult as well, like especially if we learned that patterning. Yeah.
So how that shows up in an adult is someone who's kind of blank faced. They kind of moat very well. They have a very low amount of energy. They're usually recluse, and or it can actually go the other way where they will fill space in a weird way that is kind of always talking and making sure that they keep in control of the situation, so nothing happens that's not going to be able to be dealt with, and they can be quite the other end. So you've got these two ends of the spectrum where that need to not feel certain things that was really unsafe at one point doesn't happen, and so we detach from that, and that costs an enormous amount of energy, and I know this intimately because I've dealt with this myself, and I've dealt with people with the same thing, and it only gives me a deeper sense of empathy for what I can't help but see it anymore. See this in people around, right? See it in my family. I see it in many places. And the empathy is, I can feel how much stress that's putting on the system.
Yeah.
And that's the heaviness of it. That's the, and it's that stress that leads to system malfunction. And one of those things that results in that is chronic pain, along with many other things. But so
that's a good full circle there, the way you did that. Yeah. I see what you did. Do you think that, like, because when we talk about witnessing, right, like that's the word I use for it, or I have for it, is like being the witness, like your awareness watching the self.
Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes, like, getting to that realization for some people does feel like too much, so it makes them, like, it might cause them to retract back into that detachment or the dissociation of the, oh, you know what, I can't, like, because it is a lot, like it is a big concept, especially if you've got a lot going on and you're like, well, shit, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And especially if you're already in some kind of like existential place of conflict. And so how, potentially too big of a question, but how what would be the approach there? How would they like?
I think what he's saying is that, okay, let's say that I start to become aware of this. Let's say that I've gotten enough space to go, I can see how that might be me. Possibly.
Which is like this, oh shit, it's all me, and oh god damn it, like that's on me too. Like, it's this whole
What I would first suggest is watch what happens next after that realization. Because what generally happens is the ego or the self, in order to protect us, will come up with an excuse. It'll come up with a sensation. It'll come up with a reason. It's very clever, because its prime thing is keeping the self intact.
The ego gets really loud before a breakthrough. Because it's like, oh, is this safe? Holy shit, like, what do we do?
And the amount of times I've screamed black and blue that this is bullshit.
I can't hear you say that at all. I don't know what you mean.
And defensiveness, like, you watch, like, if you watching defensiveness in yourself is, and this is probably one of the best tips, is every single time you're defensive, and you got to be honest with yourself about this, defensive and triggered, there is the gold that you're looking for to potentially change something that's been causing you an enormous amount of stress.
Because it's getting curious, right? but you have to either be able to or get the guidance and the help to shift away from the shame or the blame or the criticism that happens in those defensive moments, or the
Yeah.
the something, and
Yeah.
just enough, just to give you just enough space to get curious and ask the question and go like, okay, well, what is this trying to tell me?
Yeah. Because what the system's designed to do is go, I feel an alarm.
Mm,
Where is this danger coming from?
mhm.
That's how the system evolutionarily has always worked. And quite appropriately for large thousands of years of our existence, where the threat was generally from outside of ourselves. When we became, and that's quite like I'm talking about back to reptilian, right? Back to when our
Mm-hmm.
reptilian ancestry of evolution, and even into birds. And then when we get to mammals,
Mm,
the threat then gets more complicated, because guess what's needed for my safety? Attachment,
mm-hmm.
connection. Look at a koala, look at it, look at any marsupial, look at any mammal. The first years is spent in this deliciously warm, squishy pouch that is
Right, it looks
my,
so cozy.
right. That is I need that.
Yeah.
And as we get higher up in the mammal world, existing in a social structure now
It's the
becomes
pouch.
is
Mm,
now what's needed for my survival. So the threat then starts to lean into, if I can't maintain social structure, I'm fucked. I'm gonna die, right? So
yeah.
now our nervous system is geared towards maintaining social integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, and this is, we know this to be bang on one of the best predictors for longevity. When they did Suzanne Pinker is her name, did a meta-analytic study of what is the best predictors for longevity, meaning if these things are present, or if these things are in your life, then we have a pretty good predictor that you're going to live for a long time.
Mm.
And so food and diet and exercise are down at number 7 or 8. They're down there in the lower threshold of predictors, which is quite surprising to a lot of people. And then there are other things like, if you used to smoke and now you don't, that's a good one. Yeah, and there's other ones there, but the very top predictor is how well you can socially integrate.
Hmm.
That is the best predictor to see if you're going to live for a long time or not.
Does that play a role in, because like even coming back to chronic pain though and addressing all of that, like, because I know that that's the research done about longevity, but do you think social integration plays a role in how we
Yeah, well, because then the
overcome or
opposite,
manage these chronic conditions?
absolutely, because the opposite causes the stress,
Yeah,
right?
there you go. Yeah.
So if I'm if I'm if social integration is enormously challenging and stressful for me,
Mm,
and it's required by my nervous system currently for a sense of safety and survival,
mm,
I'm in a perpetual state of being fucked.
mm-hmm.
That makes sense, because you can't, if my survival
You can't find
is
a safe space, because
exactly,
if you
where
don't socially integrate, you're going to be stressed. But if you
where am
do,
I
you're
safe?
stressed. Yeah.
So if I'm not,
Jesus.
if I'm never safe, what
Mm,
kind of impact's having on my system?
huge.
Like
Huge, huge,
like
huge.
you let that shit land for a second, and
Yeah.
you start to realize, oh man, maybe my system is under a lot of stress.
Mm.
Because a lot of people who talk about stress too, they're like, oh yeah, those poor stressed people.
Right? But like I tell people, I'm like, your body's still experiencing the stress, even if you don't acknowledge it. Even if you
Yeah.
pretend it's not there or ignore it, your body's
Well,
still feeling it.
and that's a really powerful utility that your body has, is to
Mm,
just repress it down. Because in
mhm.
some situations, particularly evolutionarily, um, it's just safer not to feel,
Yeah.
right? And like, even there's an example of possums. They when like There's footage of this actually somewhere, um, about to die or be attacked or something. I can't quite remember,
Mm,
but it just goes rigor mortis,
Yeah, I think
right?
that's where the phrase like playing possum comes from,
Yeah, exactly.
I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
because
what
they're
it
just
does,
like, nah, I don't want to
right?
feel this. Like, this is
Yeah. Well,
too
it makes
much.
sense, right? It's about to go, like, it's like I'm done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm anthropomorphizing here. It doesn't actually say that in its head, but it,
Yeah,
it
the
freezes.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It inhibits all sensation and
Mm,
capacity, shuts the nervous system down.
yeah.
Then if it survives that, which it strangely does, because something about that, I don't know, predators, yeah, I don't know enough about that, but if it survives that, what it immediately does after is shake.
Yeah, it's a
So
trauma response.
yeah,
It's the shifting the trauma, right?
yeah, so
Yes.
it had an enormous, overwhelming surge of sensory information, too much
Mm-hmm.
so that it just shut down because there's too
Mm-hmm.
much, and then it comes to, and it shakes because what it's doing is it's releasing all the
Mm-hmm.
energy
Yeah.
that's been was that excited moment. Um, and this is the same for cathartic crying, enormous
Mm-hmm.
bouts of belly laughter, um,
Yeah.
the actual physical shaking of the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting piece of research that I've learnt more
Mm,
recently. But yeah, it's super important. Like we have a dog here that's afraid of storms and he'll get the
yes.
shake, or vacuum cleaners as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
he'll get the shakes.
Yeah.
But I've also been like, well, don't try and stop him from shaking. Let him
Yes.
have that experience. Like give him comfortable things. Like here's a blanket you can lay on if you want, but like don't try and like almost like, hold it in, be like, it's okay, because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
need to have
yeah.
that experience so the trauma doesn't stay in the body, right?
Yes, exactly. I
Hmm.
literally had a client this morning. We're having a similar conversation about this, and she was telling me how her son, who's about, I think he's like 5 years old, 4 years old.
Mm.
His friend wasn't going to continue on doing this class that he does anymore, and so he was enormously upset about that.
Oh.
And he came to his mum in tears, and she held him and gave him the safety that he was looking for. And in
Mm.
that safety, and she described to me how he cried in this way that was like a next level from what he was already
Yes.
doing, right? And she said I could feel that he was just like releasing this
Mm.
pent up stress that he had. And then he finished that. His daughter, his sister also gave him a hug, and they had this little
Oh.
picnic, and they had this moment, and then he was fine.
Yeah,
It
because he
was,
let himself express it. It's like when you're holding something in and someone's like, are you okay, and like goes to give you a hug and you're either like, no, 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 because I maybe like it's going to make me cry and I have
yeah,
to function,
yes,
or like,
yes,
okay, yes,
yes,
I'm ready to have, as an
yes,
adult who has like, work to do and all of that, like I'm
yeah,
ready, okay, like give me a hug and just let me like, it's that
yeah,
total experience of just being held that lets you, it is cathartic, and it's important because it's shifting energy. It's shifting that stagnant energy, that stagnant emotion
yeah,
into something.
exactly. And
Mm.
this doesn't mean you have to be a emotional wreck. Like you don't
No.
have to be going around, losing your shit everywhere. Regulation is a valuable skill, right?
Yeah.
But that,
Regulation goes hand in hand with this. Absolutely.
the thing is, you're not likely to have those cathartic releasing moments unless you're safe anyway. So,
Mhm.
and this sort of brings it round, is like, if I don't have a sense of safety somewhere, when am I ever going? How am I going to do this?
Mm.
Right? I need safety.
How am I going to feel safe enough, even coming back to
Yeah,
self-awareness, how am I going to feel safe enough to explore what
exactly.
those
And
sensations are, what's coming, what those feelings or beliefs that are coming up
yeah,
in me are? If I don't feel safe enough to explore that, how am I ever going to do that?
yeah. And as a child, we do that with our parents. Our parents co-regulate. Our parents,
Mm.
ideally, or carer in general, helps us practice that, because we don't have an experience of that yet. So
we don't know how to yet. Like, we don't
no.
have fully
So,
formed frontal lobes. We don't have
yeah.
anything.
So that experience that my client's son had this morning is as powerful as a potential trauma that he could have. Like the impact that a trauma can have of something simple like not being held when you're crying, that power that the impact of that it has on adult life that we see can be just as impactful if it's the opposite. If I get a very powerful experience of regulating my emotions, that's going to carry me through, and that's going to carry through into my adult life as well. I mean, theoretically.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, is that being part of being an adult and grown up and responsible is learning self-regulation. And part of that, as we're sort of describing, the first step to that is first being aware of the self. I have to be aware of this thing that is feeling the sensations and watching those sensations come up and deciding what I'm going to do about that. And I might then learn some skills, and this would be kind of, once you develop that self-awareness skill, and this is what we were speaking about in the last episode, is kind of being step one. Step two is, what do I do with that? All right, I'm aware that
then what? Okay.
Then what, right? So I'm aware that now I'm really aware every time Johnny says this, and this, it causes me to feel like shit. And not only that, I'm even more aware of it. So I was like, thanks, Luke, for that fucking great tip.
Exactly. Now I feel like I'm suffering more because
now what?
shit, now I know, and now I'm not even less okay with it.
And I can't not, you can't unsee it, right?
Yeah.
I had a real existential thing with this. Like, I realized, like, there's no fucking adults in my life, and
Oh no.
and I'm aware of all this stuff that's causing me stress, and I don't seem to have the skills to deal with it. And so I was like, this is fucked. What kind of bullshit
Why
is
would
this?
I do this? Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why it's so fundamentally important to have someone help you along with this. You need to employ someone in your life who's going to be that person who gives you that guidance on that. It's still your responsibility to practice it and get better at it. But, you have someone to go back to who's safe. There's a safe place.
Yeah, someone who doesn't have an emotional stake in your life or conflict of interest in your life, or who doesn't.
I have multiple people who I employ to see on a regular basis who bring me back to earth on some of this shit. Like, and I can't even tell you the amount of times I've gone to these people going, yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm I'm actually feeling fine about everything. And then by the end of the session, I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, that's it. That's the worst thing you can do. Like, I have 2 coaches and then a support coach and then a therapist at the moment that I go to. And but over the years, even in therapy, one of the, I don't want to say the worst, it's not the worst, but one of the things that you don't do is go in there and be like, oh, I think I'm okay. There's nothing really. Because then all of us, suddenly they'll be like, tell me about that. And you're like, shit.
Yeah.
And then 50 minutes later, you're just,
you know what? There's actually
learning new things.
There's a really good reason we do this. And it's actually quite relevant in that. So for example, when you're hungry, right? You know what you need to do about that.
Eat.
It's like this sensation means eat, right? Now you go and find some food, and within that first sort of mouthful and it's going down, you're not hungry anymore, right? That sensation that was motivating you to go and get food does not need to be there anymore because you've met the thing. You're like, I have food. Now you haven't even digested it or anything.
It hasn't even touched your stomach. Yeah,
it's just that the sensation was designed to motivate you towards that thing that it needed.
Yeah, right? For survival. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you've got a burning, you've booked this session to go see your psychologist because you were stressed out and whatever, and you have a relationship with that person that that in the past they've really helped you out. Just booking that session and even on the way to it is enough for your body to go, help is on the way. right?
Mm.
It's the same as food is now here, right? And
Yeah, I
so
love that.
this thing just inhibits because you've met the need, right? You're
Hmm.
going to get help. And so the body can down
That is
regulate.
so true. Because like each time I'm like, what am I going to talk about this week? And then it naturally happens. Like I don't feel completely at a loss, but like
Yeah,
I always have that moment where I'm like, okay, well, pick one. Like, there's a
yeah,
few different things that I could talk about, but it's also like, well, what would be most useful? But it's more of that rational analysis of it because I already know that the help is
mm,
there. Like I'm
mm,
not
mm,
like not panicky or I'm not feeling like alone or none of those
yeah,
things where the
yeah,
signal like all of that. It's like okay, cool. I get to choose now because I'm not
yeah,
in reaction.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Sometimes those sessions become celebration.
Oh yeah, I've had some
You know,
great celebration sessions too, and it's like
yeah.
very validating and
It's
very
like,
like,
look at you,
up-
like doing awesome. Look at you, like
yeah,
you're
look at
um,
me.
having a
Woo.
good time. You're growing up a little bit. You got some skills. You're regulating yourself. So it's like sometimes it's like let's take a moment and spend a session
Mm,
on just looking at how much work we've
yeah.
done. But
And I think
anyway, yeah,
that's a great way to kind of wrap up self-awareness. I mean, again, because we could talk for 10
yeah,
million trillion hours on it, like, is that it's not all hard, but it may feel challenging.
mm,
And it's the both and that you also get to experience the celebration, the moments that
yeah,
of like, oh, right, like I'm capable and look where I'm at and I'm no longer at the mercy of this thing.
yeah,
So how awesome is that?
absolutely.
So it's almost like it's also to shed a little bit of like a nice light on it for people because like it can be scary going in and it can make you go like, well, now I know all this shit is up and now what do I do with it? And
Yeah.
like,
And look, I mean, let's just like and clear up one thing real straight
yes,
is that you know you get your parents and they do their best job, right? And
they do the best with what they know.
they do the best of what they know, right?
Mm,
And that's the cards you dealt, right? But then for the rest of your life, I would even argue up until your deathbed,
mhm,
you're always going to be needing the someone who is playing the archetype of parent for you.
mm.
You're always gonna have, you're always gonna want someone in your life who's that like one step
Yeah.
past you to keep helping you move forward.
Mm.
So you're always going to need that parent, right? It doesn't end. You don't just get to 40 years old and you're just obligatorily
Yeah, be
like
like, I'm the parent now
like
and I don't
it,
need parenting or I don't
yeah,
need that support that you're right, it's the archetype of like the supportive parent. Yeah.
absolutely. And so this is not about being mentally ill. Like
Mm,
that shit needs to stop.
mhm.
What this is about is just it's just your responsibility as a human being. You're supposed to. This is why we have this amazing tool of a self. Is that in one lifetime I can heal and change past maladaptions that I
Mm,
got passed on from my parents and they're from their parents and they're from their parents, intergenerational traumas. In my lifetime, I have the ability to clean that and then pass on to my kids a, a cleaner draft.
yeah, a
Right?
cleaner slate of
Exactly, and they get to,
humanness.
and it's not going to be perfect, but they get to start with a little bit less of that bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And this is really the bigger picture of, and if you need a motivation to do this, it is your goddamn responsibility to not pass on the bullshit that your parents gave to you, right?
Yeah.
Or your
Whether you
your
have kids or not, like passing it on to
yes,
people that you
yeah,
interact with, passing it on
absolutely,
to your nieces
absolutely.
and nephews, even like it doesn't matter if you actually have children or not. It's
Now
still
the to just kind of bring this back to the, the thing which is important. The the
self-awareness.
yeah, the not doing that, the if you choose not to do that, and it's your choice not to go down that path and not to address your issues. The not doing that usually results in a cost, and that
Mm,
cost is normally disease. because eventually the system just can't sustain the taxing nature of not
The
dealing
stress.
with but beyond that, and we touched on this a little bit last time, developing these skills. So firstly, getting that, practicing what self-awareness is, and then once I have that awareness, employing people in my life that can help me navigate those things that I'm becoming aware of, and ultimately change them and release them, and literally change my nervous system. And I do all of that, and it's hard work and it can be challenging. But then I get a body, I get a sense of self that is now more congruent with what I want. And now I'm enjoying a body that I have. I don't get up every day and go, man, I don't want to get up today. This body I'm in, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like how it feels. It's not serving me. It's not, and it's like,
Or
who's
I feel
speaking?
totally detached from it and I can't feel it anyway.
Yes. And so that's why that deeper question earlier is important to think on. It's just like, who's talking right now, right? It's that viewer from outside going, all of this version that I call, this thing I call myself, which encompasses the sensations, emotions, and all the things that I call myself, I'm watching that and going, I don't like it. I don't like having to have that be my computer program.
It feels heavy, and there's a lot I have to deal with just for it to keep running. There's a lot of tabs open. There's a lot of programs running all at the same time, and it's stressful. And
it's like playing a video game and trying to get to the end of it and never progressing your character. Right? If you play video games, probably that makes a lot of sense. If not, maybe not.
Well, I mean, like it's like Super Mario. It's like Super Mario Brothers over and over again. And your character never changes. It just keeps going, and you defeat the same. Like it's just the same stuff. Like it's same castle, same shit, same issue.
So it's no coincidence that these video games are modeled in this way, because it's exactly what we desire. Is we're desiring this upgrade of ourselves, so that we enter every day into existence feeling like I have the skills to navigate this shit. And the feeling of that is, guess what? Safety. Now I feel safe. I feel safe because I know I can navigate this thing now. I know that I can, like, it's why we do extreme sports, to feel safe in these extreme things. For me, I do boxing, and that's an arena that I get to go into, that I get to practice feeling safe in a very unsafe environment.
It's the this is what I tell my students all the time also. It's like practicing these different prompts of self-inquiry in this safe space, so that way that your nervous system knows it doesn't need to flood in the world if this belief or if this emotion comes up out in the world.
Absolutely. It's mental gym, right? It's we go to people like yourself, we go to meditation classes, we go to our one-on-one sessions to have a safe place to practice the thing that we need to get better at, so that we can go into the world and navigate it with more ease. And the more ease we have, the more sense of safety we have. The more safety we have, the less reason our system has to give us alarm signals that are costing us. And it's just that simple and complex at the same time.
And complex and complicated,
But it's only complicated now because we haven't practiced it, right? It's like anything. It's like
and it's just part of the journey. There's no perfecting it either. So it's just this, Oh
and
my God.
Never get it all done in a lifetime, but
no. Thank you so much for coming back and having a whole other rich conversation, because there's, as always, there's so much in that one. And if you are listening and you haven't listened to that first episode, it's episode 21. Go listen to it either before, well, I mean, you've already gotten to this point, you're listening to it anyway. But it's just, there's so much. Listen to this one more than once, because there's a lot in it, but it's all really, really helpful. So thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Where can people follow you and find your work?
Yeah, I mean, I have my Facebook there, embodiment coaching, contactable through that. That's probably the
and your
easiest place.
Instagram profile as well is the embodiment coach. Yeah, I'll include it all in the caption and show notes. But awesome. Thanks so much,
much.
Luke.
No problem.